Welcome everyone to today's FreeSC webinar on understanding chronic pain, turning pain into power. So we've got we're going to be recording this session. If you wish not to be on camera, feel free to turn it off. But if you don't mind, obviously, it would be good for interactions to have cameras on if you can. We are fine to take questions all throughout the session, or you can put them in a chat if you've got any questions for our speaker, and there will also be opportunity to take questions at the end. So today we've got our amazing speaker. I would like to introduce you to Narin Sheena. She's a founder of Map Coach, and after 15 years as a litigation lawyer, she immersed in high-pressured leadership roles, coaching and mentoring others. But then unfortunately faced an unexpected and life-altering battle with chronic pain. She found her own ways of dealing with everyday pain and now guides others through their own journey of transformation. So what a fantastic speaker to talk about the topic we've got on today. Narinder, over to you. Feel free to share your presentation and I will spotlight you for everyone.
Thank you, Cassia. I mean, what a wonderful welcome, and morning everyone for being here and wanting to learn more. And I'm just going to get my slides up here. Can you see that?
Yes, yeah.
I'll put them in presenter mode. So yes, as Cassia said, I suffered actually with chronic pain myself. And today's talk is all about understanding what chronic pain is. Now, my background as a lawyer, I used to be a personal injury lawyer, and that was for 15 years where I used to act for employees in workplace accidents, could be slip and trips, to public liability cases, to defending cases. And initially, they were road traffic accidents where people would have had sustained some kind of injury. And then when I started to investigate any cases for fraud and exaggerated cases, there were low impact collisions. And it was my job to try and dissect the ongoing pain. Why was it happening? Because a lot of orthopedic experts would not recognize why they still had pain after the initial diagnosis or prognosis. And they'd be referred for a psychological report. And again, that wasn't showing the true indication of what was happening. And just to give you a bit of background, I remember, and I have to rewind back. So if I do this throughout the whole discussion, it's the thread of what I do. And the overview is the first step was awareness and the education behind chronic pain. And I'll admit this freely, having dealt with personal injury cases, I was none the wiser. I didn't truly understand until I went through it myself. And back in 2017, I remember a really difficult period in my life. So what happened was I went back to work off maternity leave after 9 months, and my father had sadly passed away during that time. When I went back to work, I had no support and literally had a no new team. I didn't know what was happening. I was at the risk of redundancy as well. And at that point, I didn't reach out for support. There were reasons behind that. And all I wanted to do was go back and work again, get my mind off things, because we like doing, don't we? It's that practical step rather than being. And I remember sustaining migraines once a month. And we don't think much of it. We think, yeah, okay. I was leading a team. I had a baby to look after. I'd only been married the year before. So I had all these different life challenges. And I was still grieving for my father. And I still didn't know why these migraines were happening. And when they happened, I was debilitated, literally in my bed. I was focusing on the pain, but I didn't think much of it because it happened monthly. I just carried on and thought, okay. And it wasn't until 2020, just before lockdown, I started having a niggle in my right ankle. I remember 7 months prior to lockdown, I had my son, my second child, in the back of my car at the hospital car park. And I was very angry at the hospital. I was frustrated. I was very angry that they did not bring me in earlier. And luckily, my son was absolutely fine. 7 months had passed, no problem. I had moved house at that time, another big stressor. And I just remember getting out of bed one day and I had this niggle in my right ankle, and I thought, it's not going away. And I'm not one for going to the doctors. As my husband said to me, why don't you just go and get it checked out, just to be on the safe side. And so I went to the doctors after 3 weeks. It stayed in that same position, and the doctor just didn't ask me what had happened regarding any of my life. He just asked me, can I bend down? And he suspected a herniated disc. I didn't think more of it, and he said he would recommend me for physiotherapy. And he said, why don't you try and walk it off? So that's what I did. I tried to walk it off, nothing worked. And then lockdown happened. Lockdown happened, and I had my first physiotherapy session over Zoom. Now, I've never had, up until this point, any pains in my body apart from childbirth. I wouldn't have experienced anything. So, this was a new concept to me in terms of being the actual chronic pain individual rather than advising individuals when I was dealing with case law about physiotherapy. My first session was, can you touch your toes? And me with my ego saying, yes, I can do that. Absolutely fine. And she recommended that I have a tennis ball and I start doing some home exercises. And I thought nothing of it. When I did that first exercise, I remember the excruciating pain. So that pain from my right ankle shot up towards my right side into my lower back. And there was the first sign of panic. And I thought, oh my gosh, what has she recommended for me to do? Something's wrong with me. And I had this real fluster of, oh my gosh, I must tell her on the next occasion that, this exercise it's not for me. So session 2, she said, Narinda, can you touch your toes? And I said, no, I can't. Very panicked now. And she mentioned the word surgery. And I thought, surgery? Me? Surgery? What do I need surgery for? And she didn't go into much detail, but she started recommending I still carry on with the exercises. And in this state of panic, there was lockdown, so I couldn't go anywhere. And I didn't know where to turn to. And the first light bulb moment, which is why I go to awareness and education, was Googling. I went healing back pain. That was the first thing I did. And Dr. Sarno, who wrote a book called Healing Back Pain, was my first port of call. And in that book, he mentioned about people with certain personality traits. And as I started reading, I thought, this is really interesting. Here's a physiotherapist who sadly passed away now in America, saying actually it's nothing to do with manipulating the body, but actually how our brain work and how that manifests into the body. And as I read that, I thought, that's interesting. But at the same time, I was still having physiotherapy, and I started looking at ways of getting chiropractic treatment once lockdown eased. According to the World Health Organization, there's over 1.5 billion people who suffer with chronic pain. Now, I didn't know that until I started doing my research on this. And we all know about acute pain, but if we don't, it's something like, obviously you've had an accident, you've broken a bone, there's a fracture, you might have had trauma, you blow to the head, you might have had surgery. We know that that kind of pain, there has to be rehab, there has to be a facility there to help you along the way. And we know that pain's good. So, like if I put my hand over a stove, we've got to feel the pain. And it has a protective purpose. It's actually a good thing to have pain, but we don't see it when we have this excruciating pain like me. I was in this sense of urgency of, oh my gosh, I've never felt pain this way. And I feel like what's happened to me, what's wrong? Now, with acute pain, that should heal. 3 months to say about a year, that pain should heal. But why it continues is something else in terms of the brain that generates the pain without us knowing really. Chronic pain, the general consensus is 3 to 6 months. It's ongoing, persistent pain. So that basically the protective mechanism that it initially had should no longer be there, but it is. So for mine, I started understanding that migraines was a chronic pain. I didn't really understand that at the time because I thought, "Mm, it's okay, I'll get better." But it actually was a pain. And it's like a whisper. You first think, I'll be okay, like a tension headache. But then the bigger cause was when I started having this niggle in my right ankle and a lower back pain. But what actually was it? Sciatic pain. It was excruciating. And what happened to me is what the MRI showed was a severe centralized disc prolapse. That's what I ended up with. Fibromyalgia, another cause. But there's a lot of other ones, IBS, arthritis, if you would believe that. I was very skeptical of this because I was always of the view there has to be a logical reason, a mechanical process. You know, when we're bending over, oh, I must have bent in the wrong way. That's why I've got the pain. But actually, what is going on in our life to be causing that pain? And that's where I want to get to today is what is really happening with chronic pain. There are a lot of reasons why the brain creates pain. So you've got the biological reasons, the genetics, hormones, or medications, but also the psychological. So growing up, we trust the system, the medical system, and that's a good thing as well. And I went to the doctors initially because I thought, well, I want to make sure that I've got no infections, I've got no serious disease or anything cancerous, because you want to make sure that everything's okay. But after that point, then what? I remember, so I read this book and I was saying to the physiotherapist, I've read this book and it talks about how if we're growing up, we might have certain personality traits. And they accepted it to a point, but they said, no, no, you might need surgery. You'll have to keep on doing exercises. And I wanted to challenge that belief, but I didn't know where to go. As lockdown eased, I started going for chiropractic treatment. I went for some laser therapy. I tried a McTimony chiropractor. I tried 3 different ones actually because I was that desperate. I was desperate to find the solution because now this sense of urgency was creating a lot of fear and a lot of panic in my body. And to the point of I could not walk longer than 2 minutes without sitting down. I could not stand longer than 2 minutes. I was that debilitated. And the way I got lucky, I'd say, is when I got introduced to a lady called Georgie Oldfield, who's a physiotherapist and was aware of the mind-body connection and was a fan of Dr. Sarno. And I had a chat with her. I was panicked. I said, Georgie, I cannot walk. I cannot stand. I could not even stand to brush my teeth. That's how bad I was. And we had a brief chat over the phone. And she said, Narinda, it's stress induced. And, at the time I was very angry, thinking, how does she know it's stress induced? Is she saying I've caused this pain that's happened? And the one thing she said was, you'll recover. And I had to sit back and go, okay, how does she know this? What she got, this secret sauce that I don't know about? And it made me feel curious, but at the time, I was still going through the physiotherapy, through the chiropractic. She was telling me, actually, you might have to cancel the medical treatment. I had been reading about psychotherapy and counseling, how that might help. So I thought, let's give it a go because obviously that might have a factor as well. The trauma maybe I've suffered because obviously not only did I have that my father had passed away, but I had repressed emotions. I probably didn't deal with them properly. So here I was having psychotherapy as well. But one thing stuck out for me is I could have had as much counselling as I wanted, but that wasn't going to help me move my pain forward still. It's good to talk, having a talking therapy, but there were other things that I needed to do. Now here we'll see social support. At the time of lockdown, I'm a mother to two. I'm on maternity leave. At the time, I was grappling with going back to work or not. My values weren't aligning with the kind of work I was doing, and I was frustrated. I felt all alone, even though my husband was at home as well. I didn't see many of my family or my friends, and I wasn't much of speaking over the phone. So these kinds of things were playing into my mind as well. Now, a lot of this, a lot of us don't recognize this. I didn't at the time, but adverse childhood experiences, this could be sexual abuse, physical abuse, could be parents being divorced, a mental illness in my case. So, one thing I had to do was a timeline therapy of any stresses in my life, big or small. Small could be something as comparison, somebody might have said something to you at school when you've just remembered it. For me, as a 5-year old, I witnessed my mother have a mental breakdown at my grandparents' house. And I never forgot that. But I never reflected on it ever in my life until I had this chronic pain. And I thought, actually, that was a big moment. And I packed it away in my brain. And at that point, I was put into another room and I never shared it with anyone. I shared it with my mother when I was in my chronic pain, but I never had it again. And so revisiting that again was quite eye-opening of what would I have needed as a child who could not emotionally regulate at that age. And what I needed was a hug. I wanted somebody to have said it was okay to speak about that. And in an Indian community, it wasn't something that was widely spoken about because it was stigma attached to it. Mental illness was still a concept that's not talked about like it is today. That was the 1980s. So imagine that. And I'm carrying on as normal. School, initially was great. I'd set up a girls' first football team. I was doing a lot of work there. But I remember at high school, I was easily distracted. I wanted to make lots of friends. I was outwardly very confident, but I was internally sensitive. Trauma plays a big one as well, but it doesn't have to be. This is another point: is chronic pain doesn't have to be where you have adverse childhood experience or trauma. It could happen just because of your personality traits, just the way you're wired, how your beliefs are, and your mindset. So it's not a case of that everyone has to, but the majority do. And with trauma, you've got the big T, obviously war, physical, sexual assault, serious accidents. I remember in my early 20s, I was followed off the bus and somebody had hit me the back of my head, just punched me, and I fell to the floor. And my first reaction was just to stand up face to face with the perpetrator. And I thought, what am I going to do now? And that instinct was just to give what they wanted. And they were quite amateurish because they didn't take much, to be fair. And then they hit me again, but I was lucky that I was alive. And that stayed with me for quite a number of years because obviously anybody walking behind me, it was like, ooh. And that your nervous system is in that threat alert, the fight or flight. So you're looking at the threat of, oh, is that going to happen to me again? Thankfully, over time, I overcame that. But you also have the little t, the bullying that could happen at work, it could happen at school, redundancy, comparison, like I said, to siblings. Are you got your parents there comparing you, and they don't even know that that's comparison as well. But even personality traits, how many times have we want the thing to be perfect? We want to please. So I was a people pleaser because I wanted to make sure that I never caused any harm for my parents. And maybe I did change my personality up to seeing my mother have that mental illness that created that people pleasing tendency and then caused internal anxiety as well. One of the concepts I learned was about neuroplasticity, and When I was speaking to Georgie Oldfield and she told me to cancel medical treatment, I wasn't ready at that stage. I remember going to a chiropractor at the same time as a physio. And the chiropractor is very good. Started touching certain parts of my body, but that wasn't where uh, the pain was. I remember going, you've touched that part, but my brain's not telling me that that's where the pain is. And I remember that when I was reading these books, it was all about the brain, the neural pathways. Where are the signals about the brain itself? Like, are they misfiring? This is a concept I learned from Howard Schubiner. He used to be a surgeon in America, and I emailed him in my pain. And he said, Narinda, you need to soothe your nervous system. At the moment you're panicked, you want to do things to make it better. And with the McTinney chiropractor, when I told him that the physiotherapist said that, I've got to wait and do these exercises because surgery might be an option, he advised that he never recommended surgery at all. And so I was confused. I said, I don't understand. And he goes, it's just tension in your body, a lot of tension. And so the language that we're told by medical professionals, it's not their fault they're taught a biomedical model, but really we need to do our own research where that awareness and education comes into play. We need to try and trust ourselves. I didn't trust myself, which is why Georgie Oldfield gave me this literature, gave me the advice she did, because she knew more than I knew or accepted at that time. And we know that the nervous system, it can be highly sensitized, and we've got to learn to unlearn that pain. And one thing I learned was when I got out of bed, how could that have caused pain? I didn't have an accident, I didn't have an injury, so why would pain come all of a sudden? And that's where the mind body, you have to keep on embedding the belief of actually something more is going on here. And I give this image because it's perfectly illustrated. When you have this pain, and as it started with me was fear, then you have it heightened pain, then you've got the anxiety, and that's how the cycle loop is. It creates this cycle in our mind, that catastrophizing, that, oh, we're never going to get better, because internally we are always looking at, oh, are we able to sit down again? I remember I kept thinking, am I ever going to pick up my children? Because I couldn't pick them up at the time. I was sleeping on the floor. I could not even sleep in my bed. That it was that bad. So why is pain a protector? It's there to help us. It's there to guide us when we need that protection. But that threat, when it becomes sensitized, we need to find ways of how can we calm it down? How can we create safety in changing that relationships? The first step I took was actually acknowledging my fears. So my first thing was I can't get out of the house because I can't walk longer than 2 minutes. But how about if I change that can't to I can't yet walk outside and walk longer than 2 minutes, but I can sit down and then get up again. So I started writing all the fears down and started reframing them. I also asked myself, what is this pain trying to tell me? And I remember before going to bed, I used to ask that to be put into my subconscious, so to speak. These were methods I'd learned as I just started doing an online recovery program with Serpa, and it started about soothing yourself. Like, what would you say to yourself, your younger self, or how would you reframe that? Now, a lot of the problem is that I used to accept that, oh, I'm really kind, I'm never angry. Outwardly, I might not be, but how about if I was? Not boundary setting, but people pleasing. And that anger has just been repressed, that I wouldn't really say what I really felt was on my mind. And if we understand that the role of pain is there to protect us, we have a better chance to reduce that fear anxiety through being mindfully aware. For me, I actually still was at this point of skepticism, and I joined some private Facebook groups, and I was that vulnerable. I was sharing my journey, and they said, it's okay, you'll recover. If you know that it's from the brain, but you've not created it, then it's something that you can unlearn as well. The medical system can scare you, but it's not their fault, remember. So they're trying to protect you the best they know. But what they might be saying might not always be helpful. When I was told time and time again, wait 6 weeks, then start walking and jogging, that actually caused me not just anxiety, but I was really down. I had a really low mood because I thought, but I like being active. I mean, the reality was I hadn't been active like I used to be for a number of years since I had my children. I just became this way of stressful living where I was dropping my daughter, the youngest one, at nursery, running to the train, getting to work on time, leading a team, not feeling very aligned with what I was doing, feeling frustrated, coming home, cooking, and then sleep if I could, if I wasn't disrupted. It was ignoring all that I knew, that relaxation, that being. I didn't know how common sciatic pain was. I didn't know whether somebody else was feeling the way I was feeling, the excruciating, debilitated pain. It felt like tingling, but it felt like a knife stabbing. I was getting numbness in my right arm, then I'd have twitching in my eye. I'd get very exhausted from just even standing for long. And I was really in a victim mindset where I thought, oh gosh, what's happened to me? Why am I so broken? So, really understanding where this was coming from and doing a timeline really supported where I was going with this and how I could reframe my language as well. And really being mindful of what other medics say. I mean, this is just another illustration of what people saw of me at work because I masked quite a lot. So at the top, you'll see confident, helpful, put together, ambitious, outgoing, organized. But underneath it all, I was fearful. I was a people pleaser, didn't feel good enough, procrastinated, and had a dysregulated emotional system, really. It was very much like nothing was like straight line. It was always up and down, and I didn't understand what was going on. And I'd say in those 15 years when I was at all the law firms that I tried to fit into a box that just didn't fit in for me, but I masked it really well. I Yesterday I remember coaching a lady actually, she's a GP trainee, and she signed off work with burnout and stress. And she said, it doesn't align with me. I feel not heard. I feel quite lonely. I'm not getting a break. I'm doing a lot of admin. And, when we ignore the signs from our body, it's only going to make the pain worse. We know neurodiverse traits mask a lot of pain and emotions. You've got one lady I have who's got fibromyalgia along with ADHD, and she was asked to come into the office more than once a week. Her pain increased, funnily enough. Another lady who had neurodiverse traits like depression, her stomach pain flared up. It flared up because she was getting anxiety. Her manager wasn't understanding her, and she had nobody to talk to. She didn't have many friends outside of her workplace. So there were a lot of reasons why she had pain, but she wasn't connecting the dots. So pushing through the pain, and when people say that, I don't agree. I don't think you can push through the pain because it's only going to get worse. You're either going to be taking medication, you're either going to go and have that next fix for the physio or chiropractor, osteo, and it's all great, but it's temporary. How about if there was a way that you could actually significantly reduce the pain or even become pain-free? And that's what I started to learn. That actually, once I started watching videos of people healing, it's like, could that be me? I emailed an author of a book called The Great Pain Deception, Stephen Ozanich. He had 30 years of chronic pain. 30 years, can you imagine? He overcame it, and I emailed him saying, Stephen, the gyms are all closed. What am I going to do? Because I kept on believing it was about doing. And he goes, that's a great thing. It's about being. I thought, being, what does he mean by being? And just sitting with your own thoughts, meditation, relaxing the mind, being patient rather than this sense of urgency of, oh, let's quickly got to heal because what's going to happen next? And you get into that cycle because if the pain hasn't gone away in a certain amount of time, you feel like, oh, I'm left with this. I've got to manage it. And what's going to do? I mean, my biggest fear was, have I got something seriously wrong with me internally, even cancerous? And the belief I had of that was because opposite my house was a lady's husband who had the same physiotherapist as me, but he actually had cancer on the bone and he'd sadly passed away. So here I was catastrophizing, really feeling this sense of overwhelm. But there were lots of things that were happening in my life, and I thought, oh gosh, what is happening? So asking the question, where in our lives are we overextending ourselves? Now, self-care, how many of us do it? People think self-care is very selfish, but it really isn't. And I only came to understand it more so when I had chronic pain about moving. Moving is really important, even when I didn't feel like it. I remember that the first thing I started doing once I acknowledged my fears and reframing was to put some affirmations. And at the time, I didn't believe affirmations. But with this neuroplasticity, it's about actually, if you believe 100% that you can heal, okay, what steps are you going to put in place? So I knew I had to change the mindset, and that was reframing. So I started writing things like, I am healing and I feel wonderful. I put an emotion attached to it. And I put a couple of them there. And in the morning, I'd read them. And in the evening, I'd read them last thing at night. And no word of a lie, after about 6, 7 weeks, they started embedding. I was moving more. I was doing my early morning walk in the garden initially because I was too afraid to go outside. And I was like, oh, something's working here. So what kind of things have you got in your toolkit to help? Self-compassion, this is really huge. How many times are we hard on ourselves? How many times have we done something that perceived as failure rather than feedback? You know, I remember I started doing a chronic pain tracker. And in that chronic pain tracker, I used to list in my day how I was feeling, what I would do as a reward, and every day do that. And I remember there were groundhog days where I was going, oh, Narinda, you're not doing so well, or, you're failing at this. But you have to reframe that and say, well, actually, that's not the way it has to be. You're doing really well, and you're not a failure. You are good enough. You are worthy. So really reframing that and turning that around. And I started doing gratitude, and I don't know whether anyone else does this, but started verbally doing it in the evening after I brush my teeth about 3 things I'm grateful for. And I do that. Like 3 things that have happened that are good in the day. And we don't always feel like that. Because with chronic pain, it's not something that's linear, it's non-linear. But people think that, oh gosh, okay, now we understand, now we've got to take those steps to recover. That's not the goal. Never compare yourself with someone else's journey. Now, the big thing for me was to let go of this pain, like let it be beside me. And what I started doing is tracking every day. Okay, I'll walk outside for 2 minutes. Okay, can I increase that to 3 minutes, not stopping, or 4 minutes? And I started doing the same at home, standing in the living room, and working my way. But a really good thing that I started doing, and this was maybe because back in 2012, I was an NLP practitioner. I started visualizing what would it feel like to be pain-free? What does that look like? What were the feelings, the sensations? What could I see? And I started doing that when I started to get back in my bed, I started doing that a little bit more every day. And I made it a point of thinking, oh my gosh, I feel amazing. Because when you're getting out of bed, it's a process when you've got pain. Putting on clothes, the reality is that having a shower is difficult. for me was I couldn't care for my 7-month-old son at the time. He had to sleep with my husband. So here I was feeling guilt again, that shame, that embarrassment. So I had to go through all of these painful factors. And even though I understood the concept of mind body, I still felt like I need to go for that scan. And I went for an MRI scan. And I remember, and this was privately, and the neurosurgeon looked at me and just said straight away, surgery. Said, you need to have surgery. And I thought, but the literature doesn't say this. And when he said that, I knew I was on the path of believing that actually this is mind body. Because there were times when I noticed, and I started noticing when are my pain free times. There were times that it wasn't always there. And when I was with people, when I was watching comedy, I started understanding that actually it's a safe sensation. And the more I was reading literature, the more books I was reading, the apps I was looking at, the more I started to understand that actually I do have the power within myself to fix it, contrary to what's being told to me and the evidence it's presenting. Sometimes they say the brain needs a diagnosis to then really um, take take on board what's happening. And no word of a lie, 4 days after I had that consultation about my MRI scan, I ended up walking longer than 2 minutes. It was 19 minutes. I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh, isn't this strange? Why has that just happened? And it was through that literature that held that belief. And the reason which led me to write my book actually From Pain to Power, because I thought if I can heal, or how can others learn this concept as well? The power of support. I'm not one to reach out to people. I'm because I coped by myself as a youngster. I always believed that that's what I had to do. But in this instance, I was vulnerable, so I had to reach out. And I just didn't reach out to Georgie Oldfield. I was reaching out to people, a massagist. I was reaching out to, as I say, a couple of chiropractors. I remember the last chiropractor wouldn't see me because they knew I had nerve pain. But what they recommended was um a hot and cold ice pack, but it didn't work for me. The pain actually was excruciating, and they said to me that shouldn't have happened. But then I thought to myself, actually, who knows their body best, me or them? It's not their fault, but that's what they know about. When I went to these private groups on Facebook, I realized there was a community of people that were like me, and it gave me comfort to know that. We know in workplaces, not a lot of people can share their struggles because mental health, some people feel vulnerable. Some people aren't even aware that they might have issues or they had an adverse childhood experience. They are not aware, and what they're doing is suppressing that emotion. For example, in the legal world I was in, you have to be stoical, you have to be really confident and not share this vulnerability. So it's about finding where can you go to seek support. I set up local pain cafes in Worcestershire, but I've also got an online pain cafe because I feel actually it's a global problem. People are suffering this all around the world. I had one gentleman from South Africa I've been coaching. He had 45 years of pain. He's got a pacemaker, he's had all kinds of operations because people think they've had surgery, they will always have ongoing pain. That's not the truth. If you look at the evidence, there's a lot of evidence out there, scientific, and I won't put it all, I haven't put it in here because I think that is something people want to learn about it. They can email me separately. But I was looking for evidence because I needed that as a lawyer. I was very logical and needed scientific evidence to go through with that. And one thing when I was looking through all that literature was like the holistic approach. People are thinking, no, 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 but I've been advised surgery's the way forward. But I'm not here to convince anyone of anything. And what I do at the Pain Cafe on the online one is get an educator to come and share their pain story. The 45 years man, the South African guy, he's been 5 weeks pain free. He messaged me, but he's still in the doing phase. He's not in the being phase. And a lot of people who do suffer chronic pain as well have a high pain threshold, including myself. They're very strong outwardly, or they're, helping and doing things, but they're carrying that weight because the weight from their brain, uh, they can't cope with all of that. So it goes and manifests into their body for 5 weeks, and hopefully he's playing golf this week. But really relaxing that mind means about, are we breathing intentionally? Like I started breathing, I'm thinking, oh, okay, this is interesting. Because not only was I having the back problem, I was frequently going to the toilet. Another anxiety. I used to bite my nails for years. Only last year I had stopped biting my nails, and I thought that was just a bad habit, but actually it was a form of coping. There's a lot of literature that maybe the GP surgeons haven't put out there, but it's about finding that support and finding online. I share a lot on LinkedIn because I think I wish I had that support. I wish I could have gone out. Obviously, it was lockdown, but even after that, where do we go with chronic pain? Because I was advised by chiropractors to do certain exercises. I physically could not do them. I went to a massagist in the dire hope that, oh, that might fix it. No, I had a physio roller. I tried hemp cream, ibuprofen, didn't touch it. And I didn't want to take painkillers because I knew that if I became tolerant, I'd always be used to that. How much joy was I having in my life? None, to be fair. I was in a world of being a mother. I found that I lost my identity. So finding any small wins was a game changer. So before I even had my consultation, and as I started to believe in what was being told that it was stress induced, I felt like I needed somebody to help me along my journey for momentum. Now I had been a coach for years, and it was about revisiting what I needed. I was lucky. I found someone from LA, a health coach. She'd had 16 years of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, and healed with the similar concept, and learned about Dr. Sano. And I thought, let's go for it. And it worked. She celebrated me throughout, and I didn't feel like I was judged in any way. She asked me a question. She goes, Narinda, how much time do you have for yourself every day? And I said, nothing. I said, I'm flat out. I've got the children. I've got a, can you make some time? And I started having this goddess hour for 1 hour. Goddess was for me. If it was going for a walk, if it was doing small things, and I'd write it down. I'd write what my small win is. Also, I wrote proving that I'm healing. Any things that I was doing more. Was I standing up to wash the dishes a bit longer? Was I hoovering? And I found joy in just doing the things I took for granted. So as I was writing them down, I was getting celebrated. I'd share it with my coach and say, oh my gosh, I just did this. It was to others, it would be like, And family and friends, they mean really well. They want to support you because, for example, there could be some family members who've had surgery and it's worked. And that's great because we know about the placebo and nocebo effect. The placebo is if you have a positive mindset about surgery, it's great. But the literature I've read is it can last for 2 years and you could go back into the same position. And it's not the surgery that will make the pain just go away. It could happen that it's in another part of your body because the mind body is more about actually, I had migraines and then it was a disc prolapse. Actually, where else could it manifest? It could manifest somewhere else in our body. And it's the same situation because we put ourselves back into that stress mode and we think we're not. So it's about really recognizing actually, if we have a nervous disposition, are we going to recover better in surgery? There's a doctor called Dr. David Hanscom who wrote a few books in America, and he used to be a surgeon, spinal surgeon, and he doesn't do it anymore. And he said he'd do an experiment for what type of personality types there were. And those who were very nervous and anxious and had negative mindsets, he'd give them 8 weeks before they'd have surgery because he knew the outcome wasn't very good. The thing is, it's not just surgery. What are you doing in your lifestyle? Are you sleeping okay? What about nutrition? Now, my nutrition wasn't bad, to be fair, But I still did things like I took some supplement like turmeric tablets, but also I had protein. I started doing weights. The thing they advise against, don't do that. Family and friends, as I say, very helpful, but I didn't reach out to everybody because in the Indian community they love that. No, no, do what the doctor says, do what the surgeon said. But I thought there's more to it than that. Because if those operations worked on them, then why aren't they saying they feel great and why is it ongoing pain? Look at things that you can do yourselves, or, if you are suffering from pain, where's it really coming from? Is it really something that you're convinced is it an accident that's healed a long time ago? A lot of people will say to me, Narinda, no, look, I fractured my back 20 plus years ago. I was like, oh, that's strange, and you're still getting pain from that. I had a lady, and I remember this a couple of years ago. I did a workshop locally, and I thought, let me share my pain journey. And she sat there and she had 12 years of chronic back pain being a dance teacher. And she goes, Narinda, that resonated with me. She had a coaching with me because everybody dismissed her. The medical profession said, we can't find anything wrong with you. Everything's normal. But she knew there was something more. She wasn't making it up. And she said to me, Narinda, after our coaching sessions, I'm over 80% pain free. She started having pain-free days, which before was, a concept she couldn't even fathom. So what is it in our lives that's bringing fun and joy that we, don't even recognize? These are some of the myths that the pain is in your head. A family member said this to me when I was in pain. Well, when I recovered actually, and I laughed it off. But we don't generate this pain consciously, it's unconscious. And because the pain signals derive from our brain, we've got the hippocampus, we've got the amygdala, we've got different areas. It's influenced by a lot of things around us. And we've got to recognize that. And when people say that to you, actually, you're not making it up. It's not anyone's fault. When we walk and it's excruciating, we think we're harming our body, but we're not. It's a false sense of danger. And it's that threat mode. It's like as if, say, we were in a jungle and there's a bear after us or a tiger. It's great that we have that mechanism in our brain that we know we have to run really fast. But when it comes to chronic pain, that's where it's obviously incorrect. That pain is just oversensitized and just needs to be calmed down in our brain. Stopping physical activities, no, we should do them as much as we feel safe or confident or comfortable. I remember actually, as an instant, I thought I had to sit in a hard chair in the living room because I couldn't sit on the soft sofa because I knew the pain would come on. And then I started listening to this app called Curable, and it said, actually tell your brain what's the worst it can do. And it gave me the confidence to actually sit on the soft sofa and the pain would come. It was really excruciating. And then it would plateau. And I thought, that's strange. How's that happened? And it was because I had catastrophized so much, or what I knew about pain, which I thought I knew. And I started rewiring my brain, and it took repetition, repetition, repetition. I started moving, as I say. I started off with just 2 minutes I could do up until kept on walking. Obviously, now I can do it for as long as necessary. But it's about how comfortable are you. If you're in the case where you've not had pain, but you have flare-ups, or I'd call them setbacks, that's a good thing because sometimes the brain needs another place to target the pain. Because what we're doing, we're not acknowledging what's happening, what stress we've got in our lives. For me, it was moving house was a big stressor. I was pregnant, I had lost my father, I was navigating two young children, moving to a new area. I was not happy in my job. So were my values aligning? We have to look at all of these kind of things that are happening in our life. Pain medication, I hear it so often. So I've been coaching a few junior GPs and they always, and I role play with them as a chronic pain patient. And they said, right, do you want, here, we'll give you some medication. And I said, I don't like medication. I'm very holistic, but that's all they know. Short term, it might be great. but it's not a long-term fix. You'll get a lot of patients who want to increase the dosage. I mean, I ordered painkillers, but I left them there at the pharmacy because I thought if I do, I'll become tolerant. And actually, I wanted to go through the pain because I think once, if I can go through this pain and if I can come out the other end, then I can help and support other people. You know, people will say it's something you need to live with or manage permanently. No, it isn't. It is not. Even arthritis, again, people say when they age, oh yeah, but this is why we're going to get it. And look at our MRI scan, so shows a really degenerative disease. But actually, if we knew with the literature that's out there, actually the bones and the degenerative disease on our back, actually, it happens from the age of 20 onwards. If you saw my MRI scan and compared it to someone the similar image, that person might not even have any pain. That's how powerful it is. But I wouldn't have believed it until I went through it, to be fair. There's a charity campaign. I don't know if anyone heard Flipping Pain. These are the 6 common sayings they say that it's common and can affect anyone. Hurt does not always mean harm. Everything matters when it comes to pain. Because what do? We focus on the pain. We stop doing all the things we enjoy doing, meeting up with friends, it's going to hurt. We don't want to drive because it would be too painful. We don't want to do anything because we can't even get out of bed. So we will stay in that position because the pain's taken over. And as you'll see, is understanding where this pain has come from, being that curiosity of what's happening, what's it trying to tell me? And you know, I'm a living proof that recovery is possible. You know, have I had flare-ups afterwards? Yeah, I've had migraines, but I understood where it came from. I understood that at the time I wasn't sleeping, my emotions were a bit dysregulated. And it's also to understand actually where are you on the scale of 1 to 4? Level 1 being overwhelmed and disengaged. You're never going to buy into actually you can take steps to heal. You're too overwhelmed in that state. So what small step can you take to just do a little bit and think, actually, yeah, where can I look for to believe in my brain that actually a lot of this I can help myself. That is my little talk on that. I mean, there's a lot more to it, but I just wanted to give you an overview of what it is. Obviously, I've got my book From Pain to Power. This was actually endorsed by David Clark. He's a president of neuroplastic pain in America. He reviewed my manuscript, so I made sure that I wanted the experts to have a look at it. And he agreed, saying, you know, it's once you start learning about yourself a lot more, you've got that power to heal. And even Georgie Oldfield had did the forward for me to support this cause because it is a bigger cause than we know, but it's about embedding that belief right now and helping ourselves. I mean, my details are on there, my email and my website. But if you do want to contact me, you're more than welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Narinder. Really
Thank you,
great
Narinda.
session. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Would you like to ask or put it in a chat?
I don't know if any questions came up whilst I was talking.
Not that I can see.
I
Oh,
have one.
Yes, go on.
So I guess, you know, it might be a little bit different from person to person, as pain can be something very personal, and you know, different roots can be the cause of it, or the main causes of it, as it can be a combination of things, I suppose. I'm wondering, you know, let's say that someone's in that healing process, so they've identified that their pain might be stress induced, and they've in a process where they're trying, you know, to um bring things down, to calm themselves down, to you know, release that pain, that stress and that tension of their body. You know, and they're doing well so far, you know, throughout this process. um so is the neurons or the way we experience pain something that it would automatically reflect, or would it take you know, a considerable amount of time for the pain to decrease, even though you're
Yeah,
doing everything? Yeah.
so isn't the brain's a funny thing? because when we have a flare up as well and you're healing and you're like, yes, and then something happens, it can take you to square one. But it is definitely to do with how you view the pain and what your belief set is. So how I did it, I was very lucky. But obviously how I've grown up has been different to how you grew up, for example, or somebody else. So I can't convince you to heal how I've healed, but to notice that if you have a flare up or setback, actually it's the same process. It's about letting go of the attachment. Like it took me, if I be honest, it took me 14 months to heal. And initially, I was looking at other people's recovery stories. People would recover from reading a book, have you believe, to like 2, 3 months. But it's about how much is our brain being conditioned a certain way. And so, how can we help ourselves? What can we do? And it's not about doing everything, because if you do that, you're still putting that stress and overload on you. It's about actually, what is one thing I can do that can help me?
Would that manifest into your pain straight away from the first month of you, being in that healing process? Would the pain decrease straight away? Um, would you notice that decrease from the first month, let's say, or would it
So,
be something?
the way I started noticing is like, when can I notice a pain-free day? So I remember going to meet my family, and I was in lots of pain that day. And I thought, and I was having a good time. And then when I came back, I acknowledged I didn't have pain then. So it's about just noticing there are going to be times when you don't have pain. It's strange, but note it down, track it. That's one thing I would definitely recommend, because first of all, I used to go, oh, pain's everywhere. It's too much. And I was like this in a fear, anxiety state, because you've got this sense of urgency to go, what's wrong with me? And I think the more you can just consciously go, right, relax the mind. That's not going to do anything. If you keep thinking, oh, I've got to do something to get rid of the pain, then you're fighting against it. You've got to allow it to work alongside you. I'd say pain is like your friend alongside you. Continue to do the things you're doing and letting go of that control. There's that saying, isn't there, with coaching, as what you can control and what you can't control. And I truly believe you can do it in this as well. So I can't, if I said to someone, well, they'll be pain-free like in a month, or they won't feel any pain. I can't say that, because I don't know how their mindset is conditioned. All I can say is, well, here's the evidence, here's the awareness and understanding. If you start applying a few of these things, like reframing your mindset, how will that change? But it's a scary concept because it depends on the type of pain you've got as well. Because nerve pain is excruciating, and it really did panic me because I've never had pain like that before. Does that answer what you were
Yes,
trying to?
yes, yes, yeah. Obviously, the whole presentation I think was really good, and amazing information in there. I was just wondering whether, let's say that you figured out what's wrong with your pain, you started having a different approach towards life and stuff, something that would be very helpful. Would you experience less pain straight away, or would it be something that physiologically your body would react like later on, like months
No,
after
well,
that?
once I started acknowledging pain as being safe, that's the first thing. Because if it's chronic pain, it's safe. There is nothing wrong. And people go, but it's physical. God, how can I? They can't get their head around that part because they're very skeptical. I was that person. And I remember once I started doing some meditations, or I have solitude for like a minute or two. Oh my God, a game changer. My pain would soothe. I started journaling. I don't know if anybody's tried it. Even if people go, well, I'm not one for journaling, or it might re-traumatize me. Actually, journaling was a game changer because I didn't speak to many people. Even counseling, I wouldn't openly get counseling. I'd share just bits that I thought. But actually, when you're writing on a piece of paper, for me, nobody would see that. And I could chuck that away. And I remember the pain actually heightened. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Why is the pain heightening? Then I started to believe it's a mind-body connection. Another thing I started learning was about somatic tracking, about focusing on where the pain is. And when you start closing your eyes and focus on it, noticing the sensations, what it feels like, what you're seeing, sometimes the pain can reduce or it increase or it stays the same. So for me, that led me to believe I'm safe. It's the soon as I started talking to my brain as well, I was thinking, you're not having that with me. I started doing more things, so I allowed the pain to be there, but wasn't part. So it just depends individually how quickly you grasp onto that concept. And if you believe 100%, if you don't, you'll go, yeah, I believe you, but I'm still going to go for that appointment. I'm still going to go for that medical treatment. And I always advocate get yourself medically cleared first because you don't know if you've got an infection or something more serious. But if after that, the doctors are saying, actually, there's nothing more we can do, you're going to manage it, then I would definitely recommend this route. I mean, it worked for me, but it depends. As I said, each individual's different, which is why I can't advocate for everybody. It depends what their brain's going to believe.
So thank you once again. I'll
No
leave
worries.
some time and space for other questions, perhaps for other people.
Yeah. Is there anybody else that would like to ask?
We've got some comments in a chat. This was really interesting and has given me a new perspective on what I can include signpost when having conversations to support my team. Thank you for a great presentation. Everything you state is in line with neuroscientist Dr. Joe Dispenza and Andrew Haberman. And then Sean had to leave, but said thank you very much. Thank you, very interesting presentation. Lots to think on.
Oh, thank you very much. And I've got one here. I remember there's one comment about a chronic headache since childhood. And a lot of the stories that I come across are from childhood as well. Like there's Alan Gordon, he created the Curable app. So there are a lot of chronic pain sufferers. There's Nicole Sachs, who've got a lot of resources out there. I mean, you've got pain reprocessing therapy, you've got all kinds of therapies, but the biggest thing to learn is that you can unlearn your pain. When Howard Schubiner had told me that, and soothing your nervous system from, a medical expert, it's like, wow, if he can tell me that, then I've got hope. And I think that's what's missing. People need hope, or where can they go to get that support?
Lovely, thank you. Any more questions? No. Okay. I will email out contact details for Narinder. Please, feel free to get in touch if you wish. The recording will also be available for FreeSC members, and I will send out the evaluation form. If you could take 1 minute to fill in, give us some feedback on the session and any sort of ideas for future webinars as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a lovely day.
Thank you, everyone.